The Royal Enfield Bullet, a machine brought to life in the 1930s by the Royal Enfield Company of British and England. After the Second World War, it went for a major redesign, including a new single-cylinder engine. By the mid-1950s, this engine design was again about to be changed to a unit construction engine, by which I mean the engine and gearbox, both part of one unit. These 1940s models, like this one here, were originally a pre-unit, which means separate engine, separate gearbox. Now, as it happens, about the time of the just before the plan changed from pre-unit to unit, the Indian Army, after a versatile and rugged bike, seeing these, placed a fairly substantial order for these from Royal Enfield for the pre-units. Royal Enfield shipped a load out in parts, which they duly assembled, and the Indians were very happy with them. So much so they ordered a load more. Now, with the planned change coming, Royal Enfield decided possibly the best way to do this, especially with future orders in mind, was to ship the tooling over to India itself to set up a production plant there so they could actually make these pre-units and carry on like that. So that's exactly what they did. Anyway, the change in England come, the pre-unit stopped being sold in England, moved over to the unit, and then you had the Japanese invasion with people like Honda, and by the early 1970s the Royal Enfield Motor Company of Redditch in England was pretty much no more. However, the plant they set up in India was an entirely different story. Demand for the 350s in the bullet form were going exceptionally well, not just from the Indian Army, which just seemed to order more and more, but also from India's police force and from a growing civilian customer base. They just couldn't get enough of them, to a point where it actually reached an almost revered standard in India, the bullet. Obviously the Japanese and others did try to make inroads into the market and still do on occasions. Just recently Honda have tried again with their 350 Highness bike, but to be quite honest, it appears to have stunk without trace, to be quite honest. Anyway, these bikes carried on production right up until recently, and in the 1980s it actually got to the stage where these Indian manufactured old British bikes actually started to be re-imported back into the UK in 350 format, originally by a company called Bavenar. And I was very fortunate at the time to actually work for a dealership in Whitstable that was one of the initial ones reselling these. They were a bit crude. Obviously, although they had the same tooling as the British built ones, the methods of metal production and finishing were a lot cruder in India than they would have been in England. And the electrics could be a bit dodgy, but little things like that aside, they sold steadily enough to warrant improvements. Anyway, fast forward, by the time we come up to the early 2000s, the build quality and electrics had all improved. Still the pre-unit engine, there was also selling a 500 version alongside the 350, and electric start and disc brakes had already been added to the mix, as well as 12-volt electrics. However, it soon became apparent that with emissions controls, especially the Euro standards, it's going to be increasingly harder to get these bikes through actual stringent tests that need to be done to them. So Royal Enfield set about designing, in the same spirit as the pre-unit, a whole new bullet engine, which is going to be unit construction. Again, that one came online in about 2008, but they had to do something in the stopgap, something that would still pass the emissions test for the time being, but give them enough time to get the unit construction engine on actually into circulation, is the best way of putting it. So this bike here, a 2006 Electra X, is really the last hurrah of the 1940s pre-unit engine. They had to modify it quite heavily to get it through what tests it had even then. The entire cylinder head, this bit here, where the exhaust pipe's sticking out of, was changed. The valves that sit in here a much steeper angle than on the original cylinder heads. The carburettor was changed for a CV carburettor, which was much more fuel economic, and the exhaust was also changed for something more economic. Now, in this version, the Electra X's went on until 2008. The other things I had fitted, right through the exhaust and the carburettor, had an air control system, although on a lot of them, especially this one, it has actually been removed. You can still see where bits of it went. That there is part of the original air control system. But basically, to get through the emissions, they had to design these engines to run as leanly as possible, as in more air than usual, so they burnt a lot cleaner. Hence, they're called the lean burn engine. The electric starts on these, bear in mind this engine was designed in the 1940s, were very much an afterthought, and it does have issues. You have to sort of follow certain guidelines when you start it, when you stop it, but as long as you do that, I find this one works perfectly reliably. Unlike the Kawasaki, most of my modifications I've done on this have been more about making it look a bit older, simply because that's supposed to be quite honest. It's got, same as the Kawasaki, the same point here to attach a permanent battery tender. Same reason, especially on these, if you've got even semi-flat battery and use the electric starter, you will kill the sprag clutch with it quite quickly. Should have mentioned earlier, the other change they made to these, the original gearbox, like I say, it's separate. The original gearbox on these would have been a 4-speed box. You can see this one's a 5-speed, with the gear lever on this side, any British bikes. It's been moved around to make it more acceptable to people who are used to Japanese. But you know, that's not a big difference and it works well. Right, on the back, set of cheap panniers from that veritable place of cheap stuff, eBay. Following it round, tool roll. This rack here was already on it, and the pannier bars. And as a little joke, I added some stickers to it. You do occasionally get some snobbery by people who prefer the English built bikes to the Indian. And just as a little nod at that, or maybe even a little dig I suppose, I got some sticker sets and did that, made in India. I've even put one in the traditional English bike place on the front down tube there. Right. Through, nice chrome guards, stainless steel I believe on this, and a disc front brake. Marked up pre-coal. It's actually a license built Brembo, and it's actually amazingly sharp. Moving up on the tank, I've added rubber tank knee grips, and again gold pinstripe, and all to give it that sort of age look. When I got it, it came with bar rim mirrors which would fit on here, but I'll be honest, I've never been a fan of those. The trouble is with those, as soon as you get into the city conditions, and I live not that far from Canterbury, they become more reliability because they just add that bit of width to your bike. So I much prefer the standard handlebar mounted mirrors. The clocks, another cheap eBay item. I think that cost me about £5. The thing to remember, you can get this stuff cheap from eBay, but it's very rare it's going to go straight on your bike. For instance, this one here, to attach it to the handlebar, has a small grub screw. I don't know if you can see it, just down there, that hole. But when you try tightening it down, all it would have it would push it off the bar. So I took it off, drilled another hole exactly opposite it, tapped it out, and put this in. I could have bought another grub screw, it would have been neater, put it in there. But to be quite honest, I had this one already in the shed, it done the trick. So normally they come out with factory with a locking fuel tap. A previous owner put this on, which is basically a British bike. Inside, I wondered about this, you can see there's a screw sitting down there. one of the things about this conversion, as I found out the hard way, is if you overfill it, the fuel comes out all the way over your top of your tank. So the idea is to just fill it to where the bottom of the screw is in there. Working round. Again, the side panels were like a modern touch they put on it, but you don't really notice. And the rear shocks need to change, and so these ones here were actually marketed cheaply for a BSA A10 or a B series bike, but with a little bit of modification to the top shock mount, fitted on perfectly. Now in a minute I'll start the old girl up and give her a run just so you can hear the engine, but before I do that I want to thank everyone who's watched this and also watched my other videos. I'm starting to get a little bit more popular now, but I'd like to keep that going, so please, if you feel the urge, and it would really be appreciated, please subscribe to this channel and put a like on this video. While you're there, have a look at my other videos if you haven't already, and again put a like on those too. Right, so here we go, put the key in the ignition. Make sure the petrol's on, always helps. Turn the ignition on, and then I should be able to... Yep, it's going to tick over. But just look at that engine. Performance on these isn't huge, but it's not meant to be. I can hold it normally pretty much all day between 65 and 70 quite happy on a motorway, but on a B road it just loves it. The handling is almost, I'd call it impeccable. It's beautiful. What I tend to find these days, I tend to ride this more than I do my Kawasaki. Yep, the Kawasaki's great. It'll do some stupid speed straight off the get-go. But there's something about riding an old British bike like this that's just fun. Which brings me on to the last bit I was going to talk about on this video before I go. The reputation old British bikes have, and bikes of that ilk. There's nothing really wrong with them. What you have here is bikes that are often a lot of years old and that have unfortunately been through the hands of people who, because of their simplicity, think they're easy to fix so they can have a go. A well maintained British bike can be as reliable as anything Japanese, but I do stress that, a well maintained one. After 60 years though, all it takes is just one or two idiots, and most of them have seen these people, and that totally destroys them and ruins their reputation. So if you've never tried a British bike before, or an Indian Bullet or anything of that ilk, why not give it a bash? It's a good laugh. So I'd just put some huge grin across my face just bombing this thing along the old country lanes. Anyway, I'm going to shoot off now. Thanks for your company. I'd ask you again, please, to like and subscribe to this channel and my other videos. I will be doing more content as we go. I'm going to try and do at least one a week on different subjects. So if there's anything you feel you want me to talk about, like I say, leave a message down below or a comment, and we'll see if we can cover it at some point in the future. Remember, it's not just about me. I want this to be a forum where we can cover everything that you want to cover. Thanks for your time. I'll be off now, but one last thing, please like and subscribe. Take care. Ride safe and all the best, Chris White.